Hey there, everybody. We're back with the Star Wars CCG market report. This is Q2 of 2023. I have Cam, Greg, and Mark, and we like to do this every quarter to try to bring price transparency to the game, figure out what you should pay for something, what you shouldn't pay. So all the things we're going over today are going to be in this show notes, in the video description. So if you want to look at the spreadsheets we're talking about, it's all there. So it's summer. It's hot right now. We thought we'd start off with a little bit of like, what's your hot take, whether it's on Star Wars or on collecting. My hot take is that the summer months are the most awkward collecting months because everyone's outside and no one's really, it's not the same as winter when everyone's trapped inside and they find their stuff. So summer is always a funny time with sales, with collecting. So that's sort of like my hot take. Cam, do you have a hot take for everybody?
Yeah, I guess maybe it's a hot take. More macro level. I'm going to stick with the economics and charts theme.
Go for it. I love your chart shirt.
Yeah, as for those who listen to the All In podcast, as Shamath is calling a soft landing and a stock market pickup, I'll call the soft landing on several collectibles. Marvel specifically is the one that stands out to me. I think it had a brutal last year if you look at the data. So I'm getting back into Marvel, specifically holograms and like PC cards I just really wanted but couldn't afford during the boom. So I'm like setting up my eBay safe searches and I'm getting in there and I'm grabbing the Marvel cards I want right now. So I think Marvel, I don't expect it to like 10x. I think it'll be like the economy. We're looking at 12 to 18 months of similar, but there's a lot of people, smart people thinking that we'll see a soft landing and maybe some market pickup in the future. So I think you could see that in a couple of the collectibles that crashed, like Marvel.
Cool. What about you, Greg? Also, congratulations on finishing your PhD in a month, Dr. Greg, I should say.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm wearing my Madison, Wisconsin shirt in honor.
This is exactly what I want my doctor to look like.
Yeah, good. What's my hot take? I don't have a hot take on Star Wars or collectibles. Here's my hot take. Ultimate Frisbee is the greatest sport ever created, and it's what I spend most of my summer doing. And so I'm doing it as much as possible before I have to leave Madison in a few weeks.
Thank you for not joining the sheep and saying pickleball.
Pickleball is everywhere right now, man. I have many thoughts. All right, well, let's go to Mark for his.
Yeah, as always, good to be on with you guys. Great attire today. My hot take from looking at the market recently is that actually, perhaps within the next year or so, I wouldn't be too surprised if PSA 10s of just about any Star Wars CCG card are going for 100 plus. We already see it right now, but just with the, I don't want to say resurgence, that's not quite the right, but with the popularity potentially of sets coming out through the PSA registry, I think that's going to spur some collectors of graded cards to go and search for their perfectly graded 10s. So that's my hot take.
Okay. Well, we got a really great show ahead of everybody. Just a reminder, if you like what we're doing, like, subscribe, all that sort of stuff. We're going to do a special show. We had 1,000 subscribers. Cam will talk about it a little bit later, but just give us a follow if you like the stuff. We're just really doing this on hopes and dreams here. So we're going to go to Greg here to kind of talk about the actual market and what's sold. And so all of Greg's data, the spreadsheet is going to be in the show notes. So if you're curious, please check it out. Don't overpay. Check out what the averages are on eBay. So Greg tracks all of this. Thanks for putting together a slide deck, by the way. I feel like we're really up in our game here, man.
Yeah. I tried today, trying something new. What you can see here is basically, the short of it is the, prices are kind of relatively flat from where they were in Q1. Sales volume is down a little bit, but only like very slightly, about 5%. And so this is across looking at the averages across all of these sets and taking the sum of those averages. But if digging into the data a bit more, you start to see a few patterns that you don't see, when you're just looking at the sum total of all of them. And, to be fair, I've had to do a little bit of smoothing to get these numbers to work, but I think this is reasonably accurate, which is that from Q1 to Q2, the early sets, prices and volume have gone down a little bit, while the middle sets, so early sets, I'm talking Premiere through Jabba's Palace, the middle sets, I'm thinking here Special Edition, Endor, Death Star 2, and Reflections 2 Premium, have gone up a bit in terms of average price and sales volume, and the later sets have remained a bit flat. So What this means, it's hard to say. I do remember in Q1 compared to the end of last year, the early sets were doing a bit better. So I don't know if we're seeing a kind of wave where the early sets were doing good last quarter, the mid sets are doing good this quarter. If this continues, maybe the later sets will pick up in the next couple months.
So I just want to give everyone a chance to react to this. Does anyone have? I mean, I have some theories on this. The reason I think the later sets might be flat is because I think they were already pretty expensive, and it's just you get into like a law of large numbers where Reflections 3 set was already expensive, and so it's way harder for that number to climb. But I'm curious if Mark or Cam have any thoughts on this.
Well, I kind of agree. Like unless the community grows really large, there's only so many people who are, in business for a Ref 3 set or the like. And once it gets to a certain price point, once someone gets it, it's like kind of an illiquid market, I think it was that maybe that was with Kyle and Andy talking about like some of the big boxes, like if you're trying to move them, you can't just like put them all out there at once, right? It might be something similar with these sort of sets where, there's kind of a metered rate at which they can sell at, but
I'd just like to say that is that the best graphic we've ever had on our show?
That is pretty amazing. Yeah. Well done.
Hey, wait, there's still more to come, don't get too excited yet.
All right, let's see what you got in store for us, Greg.
Or just like usually we share before the show, like our slide. Greg did not. He just snuck this one in.
That's right.
Now that he's a doctor, he's brought the.
I got to show you all up now. That's right.
Doctor in PowerPoint, man.
So because there wasn't like a lot of movement on set prices, I wanted to dig into some of the singles and just showcase some of the ultra rare prices and AI prices. So looking at the DS2 ultra rares, Luke and Emperor, they're about flat. These guys are consistent. In the long term, they're both sitting at about $225 average on eBay. The Luke has actually come down like a tiny bit, and so now the two cards are sitting kind of equal, where usually the Luke goes for a little bit more, but there's really been no significant change for those two. The Reflections 1 ultra rare foils, the Luke and Vader there, have gone down. Luke is now under 100 for the first time in like 2 years. I think Luke was averaging at about 140 for a while. Vader was averaging around 200, so Vader's also down, kind of significant amount. And I'd actually, Matt, I don't know if you want me to just sort of quickly go through the rest, or if you want to sort of stop at some of these.
I think this might be an interesting one to comment on. It feels like Luke being under 100 is pretty remarkable just because that's such an iconic card. Like this feels like something that random sports collector might just want to have one of because it's the original Luke, it's the farm boy Luke. I am surprised actually that this has crept down so much. The same thing with the Vader, right? Because I think it's another iconic sort of staple card that, a normal person might just, hey, I have 2 of these, are kind of cool. They're in my binder, whatever.
I have an interesting comment to throw in there. I'll throw it from a user from the Star Wars CCG graded group. Benjamin Bryant has a theory. At first, I didn't understand what he was saying, and I thought more about it. I'm like, that's actually kind of interesting. We keep having this topic come up, and I'm totally theorizing here. We're in the midst of figuring out if this is a real thing. But with the graded market coming on, in Star Wars CCG, we're noticing like way more than sports cards or Magic the Gathering or any other industry that a PSA 7 goes for like the raw price, if not lower. You see that in ultra modern. For a quick background, there's vintage, there's modern, there's ultra modern. Ultra modern's like the new stuff coming out right now. Star Wars CCG is in that weird point of 1996 to 2001, which is like a little like pre-modern, not quite vintage though. So it's, but usually in that range for sports cards, you see like a PSA 8 still commands a solid premium, call it whatever, 2 to 3x for sports cards, or like a Black Lotus. Like if you get a PSA 7 or a PSA 8, you're playing way more than a raw Black Lotus. And Ben had this theory. I keep saying that there's something wrong with the market, that PSA 7s are too cheap and PSA 8s are too cheap for Star Wars CCG. And his theory was that actually the market's actively correcting right now, and that the graded prices are accurate, and that we're seeing raw prices are now overpriced and coming down. And I don't know how many data to back this up, but it kind of makes sense as if that's what someone's paying for a PSA 7. Usually when someone buys a raw card now in the collecting world, which this hasn't previously existed in Star Wars CCG because it's a game and their grading is relatively new. But usually when you buy raw, you assume people analyzed it for grading and that it's worse than those graded values. Therefore, it should be less than what a PSA 7 or 8 is going for. So I've been watching this very closely as Greg has, and these 4 cards he just showed are super the most interesting in the market right now to me. And I wonder if we're seeing the raw to PSA 7 to PSA 8 dynamic taking form.
Yeah, I guess my big theory on this is just the print run. There's just maybe Alpha, Beta, and Magic had a similar print run where a million was printed, but there's 42 million Magic players, and Star Wars CCG. Let's generously say 10,000. It's very generous. So I just think it's size of community and print run versus other games that just have a bigger community. But that's sort of my thought on it.
But if I might join in on this one, I thought that was fascinating, by the way, Cam, on that anecdote from the graded group. It's hard to calculate the exact print runs, but since these cards were so rare, there was only about 1 per every 400 packs, if I recall. Like for every Reflections pack, you have a 1 in 400 chance of pulling the Luke or a 1 in 400 chance of pulling the Darth Vader.
That is incredibly
wild.
Right. But if you go from that and you assume there were roughly like 100,000, let's say, boxes made, and it's hard to know, but sometimes they have like the numbers printed on the box, and whether that corresponds to the actual number of boxes, who knows? But if you go by that, it's probably about 10,000 or less of the foils were originally made. It's been a while since I did the math, so it's not too far off from, like, let's say the MTG alpha numbers. So just a random thing I'll throw out there.
This might
Mark, if you had to rank, is it the Ref 1 foils are the most rare, then the the Ref 2 ultra rares, and then DS2 ultra rare?
It's hard to say. Like, on a per pack basis, the Ref 1 foils are much harder to pull, but the print run was probably a lot larger than the Ref 2 and the Ref 3. So probably in the end, the Ref 2 and 3 are still a little bit rarer, but again, we're a little bit in the dark as to how much of them were actually printed.
Cool. Well, let's go to our next slide here.
Yeah. Let me just say, as I move forward, I thought Cam's suggestions are really interesting, and obviously these numbers are I don't include any graded sales in my numbers, so keep that in mind, and I'll be curious to see what you all think as we look at some of the other numbers. But intuitively, I'm actually pretty sympathetic to Cam's, or Cam by way of whoever else's hypothesis about this.
Shout out Benjamin Bryant, I believe it was.
Cool. So yeah, let's see what you think here. So for the most part, the Reflections 2 ultra rare foils, you also see a downward trend. Luke sitting at 325 now, which is down about 20% from Q1. Palpatine's at 275, down about 15%. Lord Vader's down about 10%. Mara Jade is up 20%.
That is the most predictable thing. That is so predictable. Mara Jade is poised to pop. You heard it first here.
We were just talking about this, I think, in the last show about Mara Jade going up, or maybe it was 2 shows ago. So even though she's still selling for less, she's had a pretty reasonable increase. And the only one from the Ref 2 ultra rare foils to increase in the last quarter. And then the Ref 3 ultra rares, this data is a little tricky because the sample sizes are a lot smaller on these. So there have been no sales on the 3PO in the last couple months. So, that's remained flat in the sense that there haven't been any sales. The last average I have was at 250. Quiggy, there's been a couple sales, and it's now sitting at $250, which is the highest it's ever been, actually, at least on average. P59, there was only 1 sale in the last couple months for $400, which is crazy high. It's hard to know what to make of that, given that it's a sample size of 1. And the Darth Maul is averaging at 800, and there's been actually a good number of sales. And so 800 is the highest it's ever been as an average. And I think one of the sales was for $1,000 in the last couple months. So the Ref 3 foils, even though the sale numbers on the 3PO are not existent and the P59 are small, are doing quite well as singles compared to the other ultra rare foils.
Greg, just looking at these cards just reminds me like how much I love this game. Just like seeing it laid out like this, it just gives me the feels.
Yeah, when I was looking through the slides earlier, I was like, oh, this is really pretty. And then I have one last one. I'll go through this one. And then so the Coruscant and Theed AIs. Coruscant, the AIs, like the sum of the averages is about 1250. That's up from Q1. Theed is a little under 600. That's down. Theed continues a kind of downward spiral. I'm continuously shocked as to how low some of the Theed AIs are going for. I should also say with Coruscant, some of the AIs are up, some of them are down. The increase in price is almost entirely accounted for the Darth Maul AI, which went up about like $80 to $100 in the last quarter and is now sitting over $400 average,
Wow.
which is the highest it's ever been also.
Wow.
So can I just throw out a theory on this? So one, Coruscant's a bigger set, so it's 180 cards, so it's just harder to physically pull this stuff. Two, the characters are just cooler, right? Like I don't want the two Nemoidians in AI. Like it just doesn't hit the same way like a Yoda, Qui-Gon, Queen, or same thing with Boss Nass. It's like funny, but it's not like it doesn't feel as collectible. And I think three, there was a screw up with Feed where the AIs were 1 in every 3 instead of 1 in every 4, right? With Coruscant, it was 1 in every 4 was an AI. With Theed, I believe it was 1 every 3. Correct me if I'm wrong there.
No, that's right. So the Theed, relative to their regular images, are easier to pull than the Coruscant. So I think the points you make are good. Like why Theed continues to go down as opposed to maybe holding static. That I'm less clear about. But anyway, that's all I got.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Greg. We're going to bring everybody back here. I think we have a little bit of a graded and sealed update from Mark and Cam here. So I'm going to go ahead and add their charts here and let them hand it over to Greg's. I'm sorry, not Greg, Mark and Cam.
Sounds good. And you mentioned loving the game. Didn't I see you did pretty decent in the Retro League this time, Matt?
I went 4-2. That's not it's not bad.
There's some good players in there, and this game is hard.
Yeah, I have a mentor named Andy Talaga who just tells me what to do.
That's nice. He mentors you because all he does is roast me on his YouTube channel, making fun of my gameplay. I will defend myself, by the way. The video he picked of me, if anyone was watching this and is watching that, I get absolutely flamed. It's pretty hysterical. It's like the how to not play a deck he gave me. But it was my first time freaking playing the Death Star 2 format. I gave up playing around Jabba's palace, and I just hopped in blindly. And so, of course, you're going to make a ton of missteps. So thanks for that, Andy. I got a good chuckle out of that. So, yeah, we decided to do things a little different this quarter since the macro view wasn't too thrilling. There wasn't like much to talk about. I just picked one like mainstay card to kind of visualize it, but you can call it what you want. Prices have been steady. I guess is what I would say. So there wasn't like a ton to analyze on a card by card macro level. Here's the Darth Vader PSA 8 chart, as we like to say, and dating back to January 2021 through today. And you can see the price. There was that during the COVID 2021 printing money. There's a little bit of a spike, but we're gone from during all that 144.50 to the latest sale was 125. So slight decline throughout the 3 years, but really holding steady. So with that, we were saying that Mark and I were thinking we'll just go into the top 25 sales, go through them real quick for the quarter. And if anyone stops and wants to talk about a theory or a fun card or something about it that catches their eye, we'll do that. Before we get in, one key point was, if you see up here, the volume is exciting to see. Well, like individual card prices aren't like 2, 3, 5xing like we were seeing in 2021. There's 417 sales during Q2 2023, which is 23% of the number of sales, 1,810 that we have tracked total. So, we've just been seeing a lot of new sellers, a lot of new collectors getting in and transacting, which is always a good thing to see. Without further ado, here are the top 25. I left a couple honorable mentions. The number one card from Q2. Next time we do this, I should do a slow drum roll build, and we'll start at top 10 and work backwards. But the number one card was Obi-Wan Kenobi, Japanese Premier PSA 10. 1,225. Obviously, an iconic card. The Luke Skywalker. This is a good reference point to the Raw conversation we were just having. The DS2 Ultra Rare PSA 9 had a sale at $850. We're just discussing Feed, Queen Amidala, PSA 10, 800. Number 4, Carillion Corvette Tournament Foil, PSA 8, 750. What does that go for Raw nowadays, Greg?
I think you're on mute, Greg, but I think it's around 700 Raw, 650, 700.
Yeah, sorry, that's right. I think it's right around that range.
Yeah, so that's like a good point to stop at with that Raw versus PS8 versus PS. Like if you were going for a PS, I don't have the data in front of me. I should. I mean, you can look at Michael Jordan and sports cards from '86 or Black Lotus from Magic, but like a PSA 8 ratio is going to be a lot higher than a Raw, and that's just like an interesting thing to be aware of, I guess, that we're seeing in Star Wars CCG now is that. You know, an 8 is like a slightly above Raw, and a 7 sometimes goes below Raw. So we'll see how the market evolves. I'm not going to go through each of these. You can pause your YouTube screen, but DS2, and we had 2 Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight PSA 9 DS2 Ultra Rares in the top 5. The Queen Amidala AI from Coruscant PSA 9 that we were just talking about. That's a counterpoint to the Raw price. Like, look at that PSA 9 multiple. What is that one Raw, Greg?
That's the Coruscant. Maybe 300-ish. I'd have to check.
Yeah, so we're seeing like a 2 over 2x multiple there. The number 7 card was recent pickup for me. I couldn't say no to a PSA 10 Boba Fett. So
I'll bring you on here.
Shout out to Fonty Finds on Instagram. Justin. Oh, I can't get look there. There we go. Justin Fontanazza. Very Italian name. Sorry yeah. Don't put a hit out on me, but amazing card, amazing guy. So this was awesome for me. Everyone who doesn't know, my goal is to get a PSA 10 of all the mains. Obviously, it's an extremely lofty goal, but I chip away at it where I can. So that was a pickup there. Number 7, number 8 and 9, both Emperor Palpatine. 1 foil, 1 non-foil, 1 PSA 9, 1 BGS 9. So some interesting comparison prices there with the
those
foil.
are about both 2x as well, it looks like.
Yeah, interesting. So we're seeing like, you know, current market's probably settling in 2x, just about 2x for a 9. PSA gets a premium on BGS, and 10 is, it all depends. We saw a Greedo 10 go for 220, and I bid up pretty highly on that one. So, you know, the 10s, like Mark was saying to start the show, and we'll hand it off to him here soon, but the 10s, like, they're so rare that people are really going after those. Maybe you see a 10x.
So I think the one thing to focus on as well is like the print quality, especially the earlier sets, is just not good, which is why the 10 is so difficult, right? Because it's just, they look goofy. Most early sets are pretty are not well kept, right? And I think other games, like modern games, you know, it's easy to get a 10, you know, you just pull it from a pack because print quality is higher and, you know, just distribution methods are different. So that's part of the reason why I think there's a 10 premium there.
Yeah, and even this BGS 9.5 from Premier C3PO, $440. You know, so we got a hardcore BGS collector here, but that's like a lot for a Premier Rare, but they're so hard to find.
So just as a reminder, everybody, this spreadsheet, we're going to put this in the show notes. If you want to look at this and peruse, you know, please do. And as well as Greg's spreadsheet, which is going to have set information and set prices. So we just went over a couple things, but set information will be there as well to kind of look at set averages. All right, we transition over to Mark. Oh, I forgot the
number 12 was also a pickup by me for full disclosure. Qui-Gon Jinn, AI, Tatooine, PSA 10. I got that one from our good friend Manu PL, who's a great community member. Thanks, Manu. We've also worked out a couple trades, big time trades this month, which I can talk about on another show. So that was a huge, big AI pickup for me for my personal collection. Anything else before we move on, like stand out here that you guys want to talk about? I feel like I left on a couple of these honorable mentions. This Grand Moff Tarkin Japanese foil Reflections 3. Got a lot of talk. Went for 300. It's either a very rare or a super rare. Correct me if I'm wrong. There's a lot of chatter on how much that one went for, but like that's kind of cool to see a Tarkin Japanese. We got Boss Moss PSA 10s going for 275. So we got a couple names popping up you don't normally see, and there's just one other I wanted to specifically highlight. The way our data is put in here, it's automated at this point, and I saw I can't even say the name Shalaf Frazier, and I had to do like a triple take. The data came in incorrect, and that's because that was this sale right here, which is I think one Matt would love to talk about since he's a big auto guy. But a Buru Lars authentic auto sold for $350.
That seems very high. I think we'll talk about autos a little later, but I think it's just an interesting market that is a little untapped right now. All right, let's transition over, Mark, chat about sealed a little bit, and then we have some discussion questions we'll go into in kind of a round robin.
Sounds good. Yeah, thanks, Matt, and thanks, Cam, for driving here. Yeah, I mean, of course, you'll see at the top there, as folks who listen to this show probably know Japanese Hoth, always pricey. So there it sits on a kind of a tier of its own at around 7,000 to 8,000. Kind of a healthy
7,800.
7,800. Oh yeah, 78. Maybe someday. No, but yeah, $7,800, and then you got quite a healthy flux of the later refs boxes, Ref 3, Ref 2, and it's kind of coincides into grading. I think the print quality is hard, and yeah, maybe it's hard to find PSA 10s even from within a box, but it's very, very hard to find them in the wild. So it'll be really curious to see how this evolves over time. But as far as overall trends, kind of like with sealed, with graded, I think the overall trend right now is kind of flat, kind of static. These prices are pretty much in line with what we've been seeing last quarter and in recent history. And with kind of the order of the sets here kind of being as you'd expect, with Japanese Hoth at the top, the later reflection sets, then some of the later standard sets like Death Star 2 right below. Endor, actually 1200 Endor, that's on the higher end. Endor has been one of those sets that's been pretty static over the last few years, roughly around that $1,000 range. Then some of the earlier sets with like Dagobah Special Edition Hoth, you see those on here, kind of rounding out the list. Dagobah is one of those ones I think increased a decent amount of price over the pandemic. Same with Hoth, and they've kind of stayed there for now. Special Edition, I think, had a big jump towards the beginning of the pandemic, and it's also interesting to see that that's there. That's a set that actually has a lot of alter egos of many of the main characters, so that'll be interesting to see how that evolves as well over time. But yeah, I guess that's a lot of words to say that the trend here price wise is pretty static from last quarter, but nonetheless some key sets being sold there, like the Japanese Hoth, that are always fun to see.
Cool. Well, thanks for the update there, Mark. I think I want to bring everyone together and kind of go through some discussion questions. I think the big one is, I think 3 years now after COVID, it's safe to say it's done. COVID is done. And so I think what do you guys see this, finally we're done with whatever collecting craze happened during COVID. I'm curious if anyone has any takes on what this is going to have on prices or collecting or sort of the market in general. Now that we're 100%, no one can say we're still doing any sort of lockdowns, right? I think what do you guys take? I can start here. I think we have, if you've weathered the last 3 years collecting this stuff, then it's just going to continue. You're going to continue doing it, right? I don't think you're going to see too many people shed collections. So I don't think it's going to really have an impact, but that's just my 2 cents. Curious if anyone else has thoughts.
I agree. I mean, if you're still here now, you're not going anywhere. I think if anything, we're proving like people are just genuinely passionate about this hobby. Yes, a lot of fat was trimmed. A lot of the people just came in because they were bored and at home during COVID. But we've got the National going off, this largest sports card trading convention this month. I got so many people texting me about that, asking if we're there this week. There's so much excitement for it. Then we've got Fanatics coming in. I know I'm doing a sports card lean here, but like Fanatics making massive investments into boosting sports cards. We've got Lorcana coming out, and I'd be amiss to say that if I didn't bring up the Magic Lord of the Rings set, regardless of your opinions on the like this or that, or the price too expensive, and it was a ripoff or whatever, it was a commercial success. I mean,
absolutely.
Just hit a freaking commercial home run. I haven't bought Magic in a decade, and I was going back into that. I know a lot of people were doing the same. So it could be a soft landing bottom right now, and it might not ever see a spike like we saw in COVID again. I think that's very likely we don't. That was freaking crazy. But
yeah,
I don't.
You literally had Logan Paul walking out with Charizard PSA 10 to go to a boxing match, right? Like just the level of showmanship you had in like 2020, 2021 was like, off the charts and irreplicable.
Yeah, but it's not like 1990. What is it? 3, 4 after the Ken Griffey 2 million misprint cards into the over 2 years, like unethically, like, and people just stopped. Like nothing went. There's still a solid core market here that won't be going away.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that? Otherwise, we'll move to our next question.
I think this all just checks out for me as well. Yeah. I don't know that we're going to be getting the kinds of new players that we picked up during the pandemic anymore, right? So that's one thing that the end of the pandemic may be a long-term consequence, is that, new players will trickle in, but not at those levels anymore. And I guess I'm also not surprised to see that the sales volume of the graded cards had such a boom recently. I think that's a good sign that sealed is maybe flat and maybe sets are flat, and that's not surprising given that everyone's got their sets, but it's a good thing, even if the prices aren't increasing, that a lot of people are starting to buy graded cards or whatever else, right? I think that's a good sign for the market.
Yeah, just real quick to jump in on that. Yeah, we may have had the COVID bubble, so to say, leave, and maybe some of the fat trimmed, as you put it, with that. But we've seen kind of a generalization of sports card collectors that they're willing to go into other hobbies like Marvel and Star Wars and the like, as we've seen with some of the Topps cards. So that's probably bleeding over into some of the other hobbies. So yeah, there's a lot of sports cards collectors out there. So even if it's a very small amount of them that make it over to Star Wars CCG, in terms of our market, that's still a very large number of people. And then also with the spread of collecting to graded and other venues, I think that'll continue to drive people in, and maybe that'll even bleed over into some more players as well. So love to see kind of everything work together to make the hobby flourish.
Yeah, absolutely. So our next question is, I'm curious if you guys see any macro trends taking off in, the last bit of 2023 here, or second half of 2023, let's say, or 2024. So I think for me, just to plug autographs one more time, I think autographed or signed cards are a really interesting trend, because there's been essentially a niche industry that's formed around them of sending stuff in. There's several companies that do this. They just had a Keira Knightley signing that was I may or may not have sent in a Sabe card, because she is in. So I did send in a Sabe, which is a Coruscant uncommon that I did not have as many copies as I thought of her. But, it's just, I think that there's this really interesting market of getting stuff signed, and it adds an elevation. So I think signed, especially as the original trilogy actors pass on, people are still going to want that stuff, but you can't get a James, who voice of Vader is James Earl Jones. Wait, did I screw that up? James Earl Jones, he's not going to be around forever, so getting a Vader signed by him is pretty cool, in my opinion. But that's my take. I don't know if people have other thoughts.
Not a Vader, but I've got one. Yeah, those are great takes. I agree. One of my favorite Instagram followers, I'm blanking on name, is I think it's Galaxy Pickers, and this guy does the Topps Living set, and each week Topps releases a new card, and his goal is to find the live actor and get it signed. And I think it's one of the coolest collecting projects I've seen so far.
Yeah. I'll also say I think grading is going to continue to pick up. As grading companies are all unclogged now, grading specials, there's just going to be a higher number of volume, higher number of people talking about it. But Greg, Mark, do you guys have thoughts on big trends you might see in the next half of the year?
Well, I already kind of hit on it in my hot takes, but when the PSA 10 start coming back, I feel like, again, it just they're very hard to get. There's so many cards needed to complete sets. They're just going to be very hot commodities, and I think, when they come on the market, as people try to complete their registries, it's just going to drive more people to want to make their own registries, and it'll be really interesting to see how that evolves over the next year, as we've already kind of seen it start to flourish in the graded group.
Yeah, I'll just echo those. That all seems very good to me.
All right, so I feel like we can't have a show here without just mentioning Japanese cards. Is now a good time to buy them? I have no opinion. I don't really collect them, but it seems like they might be the most affordable they've been in a while. Perhaps is now a good time to buy? Anyone have any thoughts?
As far as like, I mean, I guess you're talking like main characters, like Japanese. Are you talking like all of them, like Japanese R1
Yeah,
dark
I
side
guess I would
pop
probably go with
cards or
mains, Japanese mains.
mains? Japanese mains? Yeah, I mean, actually looking at some of the, I know we were talking about like graded multipliers and the like. I actually thought that whoever purchased some of the PSA 9 Japanese mains was actually getting a fairly decent deal considering the rarity of those cards and how hard they are to get. I know, I mean, I don't really know, but I assume the Japanese cards in general have the higher printer quality. I don't know if that still holds true for deciphered Japanese cards, but also people probably didn't play with them as much. So that's another factor that goes into there. But nonetheless, the multipliers on there I thought were pretty good. So if you bought those cards, I think those might do pretty
Yeah, so
well
I got to
for you.
confess, I do have a PSA 9 Japanese loop that I bought. So I
Okay.
even after I just said I
All
don't,
right.
but I did. I was one of the buyers of that. So
Had to buy myself into your good graces, but yeah, glad you
Yeah.
got a good one there.
Well, let's move to our next question. This is, I think, a question we try doing every time, but if you've made it this far in the video, you're probably not in this category. But if you're new to the game, you want to come into the game with a hobby, do you have any recommendations on what to get into first and how to most economically collect? I'm going to throw a curveball in here. I think just getting a couple of your favorite graded cards is just a way of start appreciating the hobby. Like having a graded 9 Vader is like, oh, this is kind of cool. Let me expand from this point. That might be a little less daunting than getting a full set of Premier 324 cards that's going to take up an entire binder. I think that the volume of cards can be daunting, and versus like one card and then building out your little tens mains like Cameron's trying to do.
Yeah,
Yeah, go for it.
No, I think that's a great tip. That's what I do for sports. I have like my Steph Curry, BGS 9.5 rookie patch auto that I worked on getting for a year. I have my Michael Jordan rookie BGS 9 I worked on getting for a year. And I just kind of pick and choose these super high-end, big-name players that I really know that I'll hold for a long time. So I think that's great advice Matt just gave for Star Wars too, especially as you're getting new, is pick a character you love, try to get it in 10. If it's not in your budget, save up, go for the 9. Set eBay, save search alerts, look for auctions, don't do buy it now, do negotiate with make an offer, and just kind of pick and choose those one things. Because when you get a card like that, you hear this adage all the time in collecting nowadays, especially after some people got burned, but it's collect what you love, collect what you want to hold your whole life, collect what you would just never want to sell, Andy Talaga style. And that's kind of the motto I stand by with those things too. So I think that's great advice.
Greg,
I think
sorry, go ahead.
this comes up every once in a while, and I always want to say like it's so context dependent on what you want out of collecting, right? Are you collecting as a player? Are you collecting as a collector? And within collecting as a collector, are you doing it because to make as much money as possible, or are you doing it for the love of whatever, the IP? And the advice I would give, which is in part the advice you would give, really depends on the kind of collector that's getting into the game. So it's really hard to sort of give one piece of advice here.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do have one thought. If anyone's getting into this game at this point to try to buy and flip stuff, I just caution against it, man. It's pretty rough out there. I think the math is not in your favor at this point. During COVID, there's crazy deals everywhere, all sorts of. But I think at this point, it's a pretty hard market to crack.
Well, the market has probably been optimized a lot since then, since a lot of other things are factored in. Like at the time, grading wasn't really factored in. So if you knew what you were doing, you could just buy a bunch of really minty things, grade, flip, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I did have actually a quick note. Those were really good buying points that you guys had in terms of general like buying, or it kind of just depends on your own journey. But I do think, for example, a sweet spot might be some of the like PSA 7 to 8 mains, just because we talked about earlier. I think the market's trying to find like the raw versus graded price point. So I think if you really just wanted to get in and get a lot of card for your money. You know, the 7 and 8 mains. There's a lot of them graded. It might be a kind of sweet spot. In some ways, the non-mains are harder to find now, just because there aren't many of them graded, and you might pay a premium for those.
Since it keeps coming up, Mark, do you think and Greg, do you think a PSA 7 average out graded card is in better or worse condition than the same card raw on eBay averaged out?
If you didn't tell me anything about it, I'd probably assume it's like around a 6 to a 7. But it also depends. Like, again, if you can see the picture, like, assuming there's no structural damage to it, I can usually tell if it's going to get like at least maybe an 8. But then surface is also hard. I don't know, maybe 7, 7, 6, 7. If I had to pick a random card.
Yeah, I default to you guys. I mean, I think it was just a few months ago where I was all asking you on like Facebook how to understand the relationship between grades and near mint raw. So yeah, I'm just learning all of this really.
All right, let's move on to our next question. I think with coming into this game, I think whatever style you decide to do, we want to play, collect, both, which is I think what everyone here does. It's all about just creating those positive experiences. Like, have fun with it, and that's a successful hobby. If you're having fun with your hobby, you're doing it right. So our last question, I think there's been a bit of a waning of new Disney IP, right? So you had Kenobi and the Boba Fett kind of last year, the Boba Fett show. I know we have Ahsoka coming out in August, but Ahsoka's a little more obscure of a character, right? You had to watch like Star Wars Rebels, you had to watch Clone Wars. It feels a little less mainstream than like Obi-Wan Kenobi or Boba Fett show or a couple of the other things that were like pretty like mainstream characters. So I'm kind of curious if there's any impact you guys think the new Disney IP might have on Star Wars CCG or Star Wars in general. I actually think Ahsoka is going to knock it out of the water. I'm very hopeful, but I think that it could go either way because she is a little more obscure character. Like you have to be pretty deep in Star Wars to know who Ahsoka is.
How much time do we have?
You're like, Disney ruined everything. No, I was kidding.
I'm looking at my picture I have of Ryan Johnson blocking me on Twitter as I say this because I hate it.
That's awesome. You have that framed. That's so great.
It's the closest thing to me as I work on Star Wars. Okay, 2 comments, and I'll try to keep this short. Well, Andor, don't forget Andor season 2, and I think we're going to see the biggest home run in a while. It could tap into mainstream audiences. I think we're going to get some early Princess Leia footage to keep it mainstream, and they're going to like not Breaking Bad, but like just high quality show route. So there's that. But to your point, I'm a little nervous with Ahsoka. I think the show could be good. I am like an Ahsoka fan, but it's the first one my wife like isn't excited to watch with me, and she's got like a good feel for these things. Like she's
like the normie vibe.
Yeah. It's like I look to her for like because I have no idea. I'm gonna watch it all. So it's like she also got off the train with Marvel like 2 years before it was like there were way too many Marvel movies and everyone was like, we need to slow. And then Disney slowed down on Marvel and then they went alternate universe. And then I think Bob Iger said they're going to reduce spend on Star Wars. Like there was an actual announcement on that. Probably a good business decision. 0 people are canceling Disney Plus. They got to get it profitable for the stock reasons. But I'm a little nervous we're hitting too much content. People got burnt out on Boba Fett, which to your point, we can't fuck up Boba Fett. We kind of fucked up Boba Fett. So there's a little risk that I'm a little nervous.
Yeah, I guess I'm riding the Andor highs right now because Andor was so good. Although I will say, like, if you look at the ratings of Andor versus The Mandalorian, like it got like half the number of eyeballs as The Mandalorian, right? Like, so even though everyone said it was good, it was still kind of an indie hit a little bit because it is ultimately like a spy. It's like more of a Bourne Identity than it is Mission Impossible, right? Even though Bourne Identity is also big. I don't know why I made that comparison. Those are just 2 spy movies that came to mind. But I don't know. Anyone else have any thoughts on this? I actually think I'm going to try to do Ahsoka episode reviews on here. If anyone wants to join, you guys are welcome. But I think I'm going to try to do that in August, September. It's kind of fun to do.
I don't know about impact on the market, but I'm psyched for Andor season 2. I'm psyched for Ahsoka. I'm psyched to see the Rebels characters on screen. and I'm
Love it.
psyched to see those cards in the game. And I actually wouldn't mind if they slow down on production of some of the shows, because there's so much content that the PC can't keep up. You know, with you know, they're doing a really admirable job of busting out sets recently, and incorporating a lot of content. But you know, I feel like we need to slow down just so like the virtual sets can catch up.
Yeah, I like forgot there's like the Star Wars, like there's a lot of animated stuff. There was like the Sith samurai like short.
Oh, those are amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I only recently Visions, I think they're called.
Visions, yeah.
Yeah, they're kind of like hidden away on Disney Plus. You like really click to find them. But anyways, all right. Well, those are all my questions I have for you guys. Any kind of concluding thoughts or you know, wrap up here? These are always a lot of fun to do. If folks like the channel, you know, like this sort of stuff, please, you know, tell us what you think. All the things we're referencing are going to be in the show notes. So really encourage people to get educated about, you know, what they're buying and to collect sustainably. But any other thoughts from folks? Closing thoughts? Oh, Cam, big news here.
Before people start like subscribe or trailing off, you know, we got one more exciting announcement is in honor of, if we get Matt, he's so close. If we can get Matt's channel to 1,000 subscribers, I like the idea of the Ahsoka show, by the way. That's going to get a lot of new views. If and when we hit 1,000, I've been sitting on a Reflections 2 box. I've been called insane by multiple people for thinking of opening it. I'm going to open it, and I'm going to open it when Matt hits 1,000 subscribers on this channel. So hit that subscribe button, help us get there, and you'll hear the whole story of this Reflections 2 box. You may never get to see one opened again. We don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, really though, I feel like we should have done this to the front end. If I was like a better producer, maybe I'll have Kyle Mullins cut it and put it in the front. But thanks for tuning in, everybody. You know, this has been a lot of fun. We'll see you next time. And I don't know, stay safe out there. Do we still say that? All right. See ya.